Welcome to Creepy Tales. This is George Lunsford, and I am the caretaker. Now, you may ask yourself, what is he a caretaker of? A house? A graveyard? What? Or is this just some goofy name you give yourself? Well, I am the caretaker of legends, myths, monsters, ghosts, and UFOs. I have done massive research on my own, with no help, on all these different subjects. And what I want to do is I am the caretaker of these stories. And what I want to do is pass these stories on to you. And then you can pass them on and on and on. And that's how we keep these things alive. Because even though they're weird and creepy, they're still part of us. And we need to keep these tales alive. It keeps your blood pumping and makes you feel like part of the community. Because these stories come from your communities. They come from the early days of when your areas were settled, or recently, or they tell about events that has happened. Well, tonight, I believe we're going to talk about Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll doesn't seem like a scary story. Robert Doll comes to us from Key West, Florida. Key West, Florida it's a beautiful area of the country. It's bright sunshine, beautiful beaches, beautiful blue water. But not everything's beautiful. Some things are evil. Some things are creepy. And that's where we talk about Robert. Back around the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a surgeon, a doctor. I don't know if he's a surgeon. I guess he's a general practitioner. His name was Thomas Odo. Well, he wanted to have a better area for his son to be raised in, a warm, comforting area. So he bought a house, which now is called the Artist House in Key West, and moved his family in. This seems like a nice thing, but unfortunately, Thomas Odo and his wife were not very nice people. They were loaded. They had lots of money, and they could have been nice people, but they weren't. All the stories I've read tell you that they were very stern and very hateful and very mean to their help. Well, they hired servants and they paid really well, so people never left. Well, they hired a nanny for their little son Gene. The nanny was from Haiti. Well, she loved little Gene and she done things with him. She would cut his hair and make sure his hair always looked good. And for some reason, she gathered his hair. And the Odos always thought that was kind of odd. They usually watched her pretty close because they wasn't quite sure about this lady. Well, one day she was out with Gene in the yard and she was doing some weird dancing or something, and it just didn't look right and didn't feel right to Miss Odo. So she went out there and confronted the nanny. Well, they sent Gene in the house, and her and the nanny argued out in the front yard. And when they come in, the nanny just kind of went to the back room and shut the door. And Mrs. Odo took Gene into his room, and he started playing with his toys, and everything was nice and great. Well, that afternoon, Mr. Odo got home, and it was time for the nanny to leave. Well, the nanny come out and with her bag, and Gene come down to tell her bye like he always did. And little did he know that his dad had fired her for acting weird with his son. Well, she reached into her bag and she pulls out this 3-foot doll that kind of looks like Gene. And it's got hair from Gene sewed into the doll. Now, to me this is a little weird, but apparently for the time, they would make dolls that look like the kids and give them to them. Well, this doll looked kind of like Gene. So he took the doll. He would love the doll. He took it. He took off into his room. He was playing with the doll, and later on, they was going to have supper. And Gene brought Robert, the doll, with him. He said, "Mommy, Daddy, I've named him Robert. He is now has my first name." They thought, "Okay, well, it's his doll." But then he set him down at the table, and he had to have his mother set a place for Robert to sit. Robert had to sit at the table beside Gene. There was no other place for him to be. Well, his mother set the place for him, and, they kind of overlooked it. Well, everywhere Gene went, he had Robert with him. They were as close as they could be. He was very happy to have his doll Robert with him. Well, there's one day, Miss Otto's out. She's walking around doing her thing, and as she walked by her Jean's room, she heard Jean laughing and talking. Well, that was nothing unusual, but then there was a voice. It wasn't Jean's voice. It was another voice. It didn't sound right. It was another kid, but it wasn't Jean's. So she jerked the door open, thinking Jean had somebody up there with him, and she looked around, and it was just Robert. It was Robert and Jean. Well, she thought that was pretty odd. Maybe Jean was making this other voice pretending to be Robert. I don't know. She was very confused. Well, she shut the door and she leaves, and it starts again. And she starts getting real concerned, and this thing has this little giggle that it just pierces down to your soul. It's just this real evil sounding little kid laugh. And it wasn't Jean. And she knew that there was nobody else in the room. She grew very concerned and very upset by this. And as it went on, she kept hearing it on and on again. And one day she couldn't take knowing this anymore, so she got to her husband and she said, I want you to listen. And they stood outside the door. Her and her husband stood outside Jean's door, and her husband heard it. Jean would say something, and it would be answered back with this other voice. And Jean would laugh, and this other, this dark sounding evil child laugh would come out. Well, they're very concerned, and finally it was just more than he could take, and he jerked the door open and grabbed the doll and took it out, and Jean was upset. He was crying and didn't know what to do, and Mr. Thomas Otto grabbed the doll, stuck it in a box, and took twine and wrapped it up really tight so Jean couldn't get into it, and tied it up real like a knot so he couldn't get into it, walked up to the attic and set it on the shelf, closed the attic door and left. They finally got Jean to calm down, and that night they all went to bed. Jean was a little upset when he went to sleep, but he finally went to sleep, and well, Mr. and Miss Odo went to bed, and he didn't want to have to do that way for his son, but it bothered him that something wasn't right. They were laying there, and just as they were going to sleep, they heard a thud. That's like, what's that noise? Something went thud in the attic. Then they heard footsteps go across the attic, little light footsteps like a child. Well, that just infuriated Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas Otto jumped up and went upstairs and jerked the door open, and Jean was in his bed asleep. Then what caused the noise? What caused something to scamper? Maybe it was an animal. Maybe that's what it was. It had to be an animal. A cat got in the attic, knocked off the box, and that's what they heard. They knocked the box off, and then it scampered across. That's what they heard. That had to be what it was. Then, as he started back to go to his room, he heard the giggle. He heard scampering across the ground again, and that evil, evil little giggle. And he went upstairs, and he walked into the attic, and the box was laying in front of the door, and all the binding was gone. It was just like it'd been just ripped apart. And he's seen the box, and he's seen the twine, and he looked, and then he picks it up out of the dust, and as he's leaning over, he sees in the dust in the attic what looks like little feet prints. What is this? He wonders to himself. He still thinks there's an animal up there. Maybe an animal tore up the box and pulled the doll out. That's what it was. It's all it could be. So he follows the footprints. He's got to get rid of this animal out of his house. It's not, it's going to drive him crazy for the rest of the night. So he follows the footprints in the dust, and he comes to the wall, and as he gets over there, there's a shelf, and he turns, and right as he stands up, there's Robert, eye to eye with the doll. And he doesn't think anything at first of it, but then he realizes the doll is expression has changed. It's looking at him eye to eye. He can feel this unmitigated fear boiling up deep inside him, almost like it's boiling to his soul. And he grabs the doll and he stuffs it back in the box and leaves the attic in a hurry. He gets back down to the room where his wife is, and she asks him, "What was it?" He's nothing. I didn't see nothing. There's nothing up there. Don't worry about it. It's probably an animal. Well, they kind of blow it off, and the box falls again. They ignore it. If they ignore it, it goes away. If they ignore it, it can't bother them. So they ignore it. They roll over, they go back to sleep. Right as he's going to sleep, he hears the giggle again. The giggle that burns deep inside of him. They go to sleep, and this happens night after night after night. And finally, Gene's in school. Gene is in school, and everything starts quietening down at the house. They don't really hear anything anymore. Every now and then they'll hear something scamper through the attic. Every now and then they'll hear a slight inkling of the giggle. But as Gene gets older, it gets lesser. Finally, Gene's in high school, and he graduates, and they're all very happy, and Gene tells his parents, "I want to go to college." And he's done real good in school, so he's very much allowed to go, and his dad's all excited, thinking he's going to be a physician like him, and Gene tells him no, he wants to be an artist. He wants to go to France and study among the greats to be an artist. Reluctantly, his parents says okay, and they send him off to France. And while he's in France, it starts again. The nightly torment of this little doll tormenting his mom and his dad every night. Well, Gene's over in France learning to be an artist. He's learning to be a great painter. He's learning all this stuff, and he meets the woman of his dreams. He falls deeply in love. They get married. They graduate. He graduates through his college, and he gets a note telling him his dad has passed away, and he's upset. But his mom asks him if he'll come home. So him and his wife decide to move back into the childhood house, and he can become a painter in Key West, and that's what they'll do. They go back home, and he opens the door into the sunroom before he goes in, and there sits his mom in the sunroom. She's very happy to see him, but she looks just totally frazzled. She looks just exhausted. Her eyes are blackened from not sleeping, and she don't like she hadn't been eating well, and her color of her skin's a little off. And so Gene introduces his mom to his wife, and they do the pleasantries. "Hi, how are you? I'm good." They did all that stuff. Well, what happens after that? Gene decides to go out and get the bags and start bringing them in. His mother reaches up and grabs his wife and says, "Don't let him go to the attic. Don't let him find the doll. Whatever you do." She looks at her mother-in-law like, "Okay, if you say so." She's thinking, this lady's lost her mind. She don't know what to think about all this. Well, they move in, and one day, shortly after that, his wife comes up there. He has moved into what they call the turret room. It seems to be a little room off to the corner of the house, over facing the street, and it's kind of like a round room, but on the edge of the house. And that's where he sets up his area to do his painting, because he's inspired by the beautiful scenery and everything around him. So it seems like the natural place for him to do artwork. Well, he sits up in there and he starts looking for something. He can't find this. I don't know what item he was looking for. I have no clue what item the guy was looking for. But he was looking for something, and it was driving him nuts to find it. Well, his wife comes in the door. He tells her, I'm going up the attic and see if this is up there. She's like, no, 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 I need you to do this for me. He kind of gets mad and goes and does whatever she wants him to do. That's what we do. We help him do what we asked to do. Well, he goes and does it, and she keeps trying to stop him by doing all this little stuff. And finally, Gene just gets irritated. He goes, I'm going to go to the attic and get what I need. He goes up to the attic, opens the door, and he bebops in there, and he's looking around, and he finds Robert. He finds his best friend growing up. He brings out Robert, and he shows to his wife, this is Robert, this is the doll I was telling you about. And his mother just gets this, oh my God, she has the most frightening look on her face. She's scared because she knows what's going to happen. And Robert is with Gene again, and Gene is so happy. He keeps Robert with him no matter what he does. He keeps him with him. He even sets up a little chair for Robert in his art room. Robert watches over him while he paints. He talks to Robert while he paints. Well, his mother passes away. Do not know why. I just know she passes away. And one day his wife, she knows Robert's always with him, and she's passing by one day, and she hears Gene in the turret room, and he's talking, and this kid's voice comes out. And she don't know what to think about this, because this is a little weird, Her full-grown husband is talking to a kid. So she jerks the door open and looks, and it's just Gene and Robert. She's very confused, and then this keeps on happening, and it keeps on happening, and she's starting to get excited, and she's getting worried, because here it is, constantly something going on. This kid's voice just keeps showing up, and then one night they're laying in the bed. They're sleeping, and Gene always has a place beside his bed for Robert to sleep. And all of a sudden, one night, they're laying there, and his wife's startled awake. She hears a thud, and she wakes up. And she's looking around, but she hears something moving in the room. It's moving all around the room, but she hears little footsteps going everywhere. She didn't know what's going on. She's very confused, and she's looking and looking and looking, and nothing. She don't see a thing. She sees a little shadow every now and then. And right as she goes to lay back down, there's Robert right beside her. She looks into the eyes of this little evil doll, this 3-foot doll that has tormented everyone. And she is scared, and she finally wakes Gene up, and Gene gets up and picks Robert up and puts him back to bed, and like it's nothing. But she's terrified, and she hears the giggle. This terrible, evil sound that comes out of this doll and pierces to your soul. Well, Gene continues on with his artwork. He becomes quite famous. There's pictures of Gene holding Robert at the art openings. There's pictures of Gene, and he's always with Robert. Robert's always with Gene. They're inseparable. Well, as things go, Gene gets older and passes away, leaving the wife, Robert, and the house. She can't take it. She is done with this doll. She sells the house. Lady buys the house. Well, actually, before she buys it, there are stories that say people will pass by this house and look up in the turret, and they would see Robert staring at them. See him looking out at them. And if they moves their head and look back, he'd be gone. At night, there's reports that they could hear Robert laughing, and it would just penetrate out the house into the night. Well, this lady buys the house finally, and she's cleaning in there, getting everything ready. She's going to do some changing around, and she's happy with the house, and she's doing something, and she opens the door to the room, and she's looking around and says, oh, this is nice, This is, must have been Gene Odo's room. And she looks, and she sees some artwork there, some unfinished stuff, some finished stuff, and she sees the doll, and she She didn't really think anything about it. She seen the chair, she seen the doll, so she picked the doll up, set the doll in the chair. It belonged there. Makes sense, right? Well, she shuts the door. She leaves. She's back cleaning the rest of the house, and she hears a thud. A soft little thud. Then she walks back up there and opens the door. She don't see anything. She don't really think. She shuts it. She hears footsteps, little footsteps run across the room. She jerks the door back up and looks, and nothing's really odd except for the chair's empty. The doll is not in the chair. Well, she looks down expecting to see the doll on the ground like it fell out of the chair, and it's not there. It's across the room. Well, this kind of freaks her out. So she don't really think much about it. She closes the door and she goes, and well, they're cleaning the house up and they decide to stay there at night. And they're laying in the bed and they hear this noise, this creepy little giggle, and then she hears footsteps running all over the room. And they wake up and they sit up in the bed, and Robert's at the end of the bed, giggling, that evil little giggle with those evil, deep eyes staring at them. They leave the house. They tried to make the house a bed and breakfast. That didn't do well because Robert tormented everybody that came in. Somebody bought the house and said, okay. They took the doll and they gave it to the museum. They donated it. There's a little museum in Key West. The name of the museum, if I'm not mistaken, starts with an M. I don't remember the name offhand, but the doll is in the museum. Well, when they acquired the doll, the curator had a nice little case for it, put him in his little chair that he had, and they had him all dusted off, and he looked really good, and put him in the glass case, and left. And the cleaning lady come in, and she dusted everything real good, and cleaned everything, and moved the glass off the doll, dusted the doll, made sure he was good and clean, put the glass over top of it, cleaned the glass, made sure it looked good, no fingerprints, turned off all the lights, locked the doors, and left. Well, the next morning the curator comes in and the lights are on, the glass case is crooked, and there's dust on Robert's feet. He's kind of concerned and kind of wondering, what the cleaning lady do. So he confronts the cleaning lady and says, hey, I pay you a wage. This is what I expect. And she said, I did that. She goes, I cleaned. I did everything I was supposed to do. He said, no. He said, when I came in, this was messed up. There was dust on the doll's feet, and the lights were all on. She says, look, I did not do that. I had everything clean. I had the lights turned off. He said, look, I'm going to stay, and I'm going to watch you do your job tonight. I'm going to make sure you do it right. So the curator stays. They clean up. He watches her do. She does everything perfect. The lady does a wonderful job. Well, all the lights are turned out. The door's closed and locked. Next day, the curator comes in and the lights are on. The glass case is skewed. The doll has dirt on its feet. Now, I don't know if anybody believes in this stuff or not. I really don't. I can tell you that if this was voodoo that was used on this doll, voodoo's birthplace comes from the West Africa. It was brought over during the slave trade. It's prevalent in New Orleans. It's prevalent in Haiti, where the nanny was from, and many other places. Now, there is good and evil in the world, and I guess you've got to decide whether you believe these stories or not. But I can tell you that with my 51 years of experience, I can tell you there is truly good and there is truly evil. Where does your heart lie? What makes you stay up at night? Do you have good in your heart, or do you have evil in your heart? These are things you must ask yourself and things you must confront. All I know is I know what's good and I know what's evil. And I'm sticking on the good side because the evil is just plain old creepy. Well, this has been George Lunsford, the caretaker. I hope you have a wonderful night, and may all your dreams be happy and all your wishes come true. Sleep well, And if you hear little footprints at night, it could be Robert.